Support for Michigan Public comes from the University of Michigan's Look to Michigan campaign, working towards a stronger, more connected Michigan, championing sustainability, global citizenship, and educational opportunity. More information at looktomichigan.umich.edu.
Here's the thing about driving in Michigan. A lot of it feels wrong. The roads are cracked and cratered. People drive like they're auditioning for a Fast and Furious sequel. And if you leave more than a few inches between you and the car in front of you, someone is going to cut in. Because apparently, everyone's in a hurry. But there's also this other thing about Michigan roads. Something that the first time you see it, it makes you stop and wonder.
When you make a left, but instead of going left, you just turn around, right?
It's a U-turn that confuses people from out of state.
Because Michiganders don't like to turn left. They'd rather turn right. I have no idea.
This is On Hand, a Michigan podcast that answers your questions about the things that make our state unique. I'm April Baer.
My question is, why do we do the Michigan left? And the reason I was wondering was because it seems very unusual. I've never I've driven in a lot of different states, and I've never seen it in other places.
That's Paul Schur. He lives in Ann Arbor now, but is originally from Pennsylvania. To answer Paul's question, we're roping in producer Michelle Jokish-Polo. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Bear.
So, what is up with these Michigan lefts?
I know what's up with them. I really feel like I've gotten used to them after living in Michigan for more than 10 years. But when I first came here from Ecuador, I remember here in Michigan not only struggling to figure out how to zipper onto the highway, but also how to turn left.
I know. I mean, I just want to, I grew up in Ohio, and that's where I got my first driver's license and everything. Shall we say there are places where there's not a lot of cops around where people do the Michigan left, but I'm positive it's not legal. So what actually is a Michigan left?
It's when you're at a major intersection and you want to turn left, but instead of turning directly, you drive straight through, make a U-turn at the median, and then turn right to head in the direction you initially wanted to go to. Now that we know what it is, we all wanted to know why we do a Michigan left here. So I did some digging and I found this bus driver. Her name is Betty Nelson. She's from West Michigan, and she's the world champion of the School Bus Driver International Safety Competition. And she drove me around to show me how she does a Michigan left.
When you want to make a left, you're going to get your left signal on.
So we're driving along the East Belt Line, going west, which if you're from West Michigan, you know exactly what main avenue we're talking about. It's about noon. It's really busy. There's 2 lanes per direction.
You do want to tap your brakes. You don't want to step hard on your brakes. I'm checking the mirror behind me, and I can see I have a vehicle behind me. So I'm not going to slow down a lot in the traffic lane. I'm going to get into my left turn lane, and then I'm going to slow down.
And Betty, who's on the left-hand lane, just drives right past Fulton Street. But instead of turning onto the street, which is where we want to go, she approaches the median crossover.
Then as you come around, as you loop around that left turn lane, don't slow down on the roadway that you're on, you're trying to get off from.
And dun 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 dun, makes a legal U-turn just past the intersection. And Betty also explains to me why Michigan lefts are actually pretty helpful for her as a driver.
Gets those cars out of that traffic lane so you can have 2 lanes of traffic, and traffic will continue to flow more easily and a little quicker than if they have to all back up and wait for the people turning left.
Why do we call it the Michigan left?
You know, I think maybe because it first came to be in Michigan, they first used to call it the Detroit left. And maybe when they developed it back in the 60s, they were just trying to figure out what to do with all the traffic in Detroit. But then as it expanded throughout Michigan, you know, here we are up in Grand Rapids. You don't want to call a Michigan left up in Grand Rapids a Detroit left.
Why, though? How did Michigan develop this really different way of moving traffic through snarly left turns on busy roads? I just think there aren't that many other places that do that.
Well, we're actually going to talk to somebody who has engineering knowledge about Michigan roads and the left.
So what's interesting when you grow up here, like even when you ask me about driving them, it's like, well, that's just the way the road is, right? So I didn't know any different. And it's the same thing when you're a designer. I didn't know that everybody didn't have these. It was like, yeah, this is just how you do it.
We're going to meet this guy after we take a short break.
Support from Michigan Public's On Hand podcast comes from Lake Trust Credit Union, working to empower financial well-being for Michigan consumers, businesses, and communities. Committed to financial solutions and advice to support people and families. More information at laketrust.org.
It starts where it ends. The city of Detroit, the birthplace of what we now call the Michigan left. That's what Kirk Steudle told us. For more than 20 years, he ran Michigan's Department of Transportation. He is the man who vowed he would do all in his power to maintain Michigan's status as the nation's only automobile empire. Maybe not as easy a job as you'd think.
If you just go back 100 years, that's what was happening in Detroit. All of these cars, in fact, if you think about the original car that went on the road, there was no paint line. So the car drove wherever it wanted to drive, right? So even this, we drive on the right, that wasn't a thing, right? Because nobody had ever driven a car, so they didn't know to drive on the right. They drove wherever they wanted. So at some point, a traffic engineer put a line in the middle of the road and said, okay, everybody stay on the right side of this line and we'll be able to go through here efficiently as possible.
Do we know if Michigan and Detroit were the first places in the U.S. to experiment with this kind of design?
So if you go back to the 50s and the boom, the post-war boom that's happening, all the returning vets are all buying cars, they're moving, there's traffic problems. Now, if you think about our interstate system, that didn't get signed until 1956, right? So Michigan was actually building freeways. The Lodge Freeway was built in the 40s. So there was traffic problems in the city that traffic engineers were trying to figure out, how do I move people more efficiently, because everybody's all plugged up. Well, now you get to the 50s and the 60s and really a lot of mobility happening that it dictated, okay, we got to do something different here.
Could you talk us through, from a traffic engineering perspective, the mechanics of the Michigan left?
Sure. So I think every driver has experience sitting in a left turn lane, maybe on a boulevard, right? And there's two stoplights. So you get one or two cars and you're in between the lights and you're kind of like in this no man's land, right? So then the light changes, so then you go, and then the three cars behind you that are really behind another traffic signal, they go. In the meantime, everybody is stopped, waiting for these 5 or 6 cars to get through here. So what does Michigan left do? Okay, it takes the left turns out of it. In this case, they're going with the flow of traffic. The time savings going right to turn left, it actually is about the same time, if not shorter, than if you sat in that queue and waited to turn left, right? But you're moving the whole time.
But there are a limited number of people who can move into the Michigan left at once. Are you saying it is significant enough to relieve the pressure on most intersections?
Yeah, so in the early days, the first one they did, they put it 330 feet from the intersection. So you turn right and it was 330 feet. What they determined was that wasn't far enough. So they made them 660 feet. So now when you turn right, you have a very long storage area where you can store probably, I'm going to make this up, 10 cars, right? You can store a lot more cars than if you're sitting in a left turn lane. And, if you pull up to an intersection right now with a left turn arrow and you're 10 cars back, what are you thinking?
You're swearing to
I'm going to
yourself.
be here for 2 or 3
Yeah.
signals on the light, right? The core benefits of the Michigan left are efficiency and safety. And let's talk specifically about safety. 75% of all the crashes in an urban area are related to left turns. Almost 50% are as if you're on the major road and you're turning left into a driveway, into another street, whatever, you're stopped and you're turning left. You have a greater chance of getting rear-ended, or when you turn, there's a car coming towards you. So 50% of crashes is somebody turning left off of the primary road into a driveway, a street, or something else. More than 25%, or about 25%, are the left turners coming out of that driveway. So 75% of crashes that happen in the urban area are due to left turns. So if you can eliminate the left turns or control the left turns so that they happen at a very specific time, you eliminate all those crashes.
So how did the department decide where to put Michigan lefts? Are there certain kinds of situations and conditions where the design works best or where it doesn't work at all?
Yeah, that's a great question because there really is criteria of which I can't give you a book and say here's the criteria, but it really is for heavily traveled boulevards, right? So you have to have a boulevard. If you don't have a boulevard, it's not going to work. Now, you'll see them on, say, 696 when you're trying to get on a freeway in Detroit and you come up Greenfield Road. You have to turn to the right and go down, go across the bridge to get on the other side. So the Michigan left is at the freeway as well. What it's doing is separating and organizing the traffic.
Okay, so now we know from an engineering perspective why we do the Michigan left. But can we really take ownership over it? Can we really just put our state name on a feat of infrastructure engineering? Kirk says absolutely.
I do remember sitting in a national conference in the late 2000s, and my colleague, who was a very good friend of mine from Utah, and Utah was viewed as very innovative from a traffic perspective, and he was giving this presentation about these indirect lefts and raised my hand and said, that's called the Michigan left, and we put those in 1960. Glad you finally found them, right? 50 years later.
So this road design truly is a Michigan left. When we see it in another state, we can say, that there is a Michigan thing. Michelle, you've solved the mystery of why we do the Michigan left. Thank you for shedding light. I know our listeners appreciate it too.
Yeah, no problem. And by the way, if you were curious, Betty, our bus driver, gave me one more interesting tip about left turns.
Something that's kind of neat, and a lot of people don't know it, is some of these turns will have a traffic signal. And with that traffic signal, if it's red, you can actually turn left on a red light, but only if you're turning onto a one-way street. Unless there's a sign prohibiting it. If there's a sign that says no left on red, then obviously you can't. It's kind of fun when you do it and the people near you kind of like, what are you doing? Where are you going? You know, you're not supposed to turn, but if you have a light and it's red, you can actually turn left only if you're turning onto a one-way street.
Stop.
Yep, true fact.
It's news I can use. Thanks, MJP.
Of course.
And thanks to Paul Schur, who submitted his question through our online portal. What's your question about Michigan? This podcast is here solely to get answers to your questions about our state, any person, place, or thing that makes us quirky and different. Send us your question, and we may just investigate it on a future episode of On Hand. You can send them in an email or a voice memo to onhand@michiganpublic.org. That's onhand@michiganpublic.org. Today's episode was produced by Michelle Jokish-Polo. Other producers are Mike Blank, Ronia Kapansag, our senior producer, Mercedes Mejia, and April Van Buren. Our executive producer is Laura Weber-Davis. Digital services by Jody Westrick. Music came from Blue Dot Sessions and also from Audio Network. Thanks for listening. Coming to you from the land of hope and dreams, I'm April Baer. Bye-bye.